Right, so we're diving into George R.R. Martin's world, A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah. Going beyond the screen, into the books, and all the extra stuff you found, like academic analyses and personal notes.
A real deep dive then.
Exactly. We'll be unearthing all those hidden gems, making those connections that, maybe people haven't thought of before.
Right, like for instance, those trees with faces carved in them? Weirwoods, they're called. White bark, red leaves, sacred to those old gods up in the north.
Oh, yeah. Details like that, they just add so much to the world. It's little things like that that just make the world that much richer.
For sure. And that's where you come in. Help us connect the dots, figure out why this stuff matters.
Happy to do it. Love to dive into this stuff.
All right, well, one thing that really struck me was Tyrion Lannister's journey. Exiled after everything in King's Landing, ends up in Essos, specifically Slaver's Bay.
Right.
And he's got this line, Slaver's Bay is a long way from Pentos,
Bruh.
but the world is one great web, and a man dare not touch a single strand lest all the others tremble. What do you think of that?
Foreshadowing, I
Nice.
think. Brilliant foreshadowing, really. Like, even though he's far away, what he does in Essos, especially with Daenerys, it's all going to come back to Westeros.
Yeah.
It all comes back around. It's like Martin saying, hey, this world, it's all connected. You can't just mess with one part without affecting everything else.
Right, right. Okay, so speaking of journeys, we've got Bran Stark going beyond the wall, constantly facing those others, scary stuff. And then there's Cold Hands, this mysterious figure who helps him but kind of creeps me out. Smells like dead meat, dry blood,
Yeah.
a faint whiff of rot and cold.
Yeah, Cold Hands is a whole mystery in himself. Like, who is he? How'd he die and come back? What's he doing? It makes you think about those big themes, death and resurrection. You see it with the others, and later with characters like Beric Dondarrion and Lady Stoneheart.
Yeah, lots of back from the dead in this world. Okay, switching gears, the source material also focuses on Theon Greyjoy. He gets transformed into Reek by Ramsay Bolton. Brutal psychological torture. There's this scene where Reek actually murders a dying man, Ralph Kenning, and it's messed up. Cruelty and desperation. What's going on in Theon's head at this point?
It's rough, that's for sure. Theon, or Reek, I guess, he's just broken. Ramsay's abuse just shattered who he was. You can see the human cost of war there, just how awful people can be to each other.
Yeah, it's a dark side of humanity on display.
Yeah.
Now, across the Narrow Sea, we've got Daenerys trying to rule Slaver's Bay. It's tough, balancing her ambition and her feelings for Dario Naharis and everyone challenging her. She ended up making some tough calls. Marrying his Darzo Larac, reopening the fighting pits, all those concessions to Myrini's tradition.
Yeah, that's where you see her character really changing, evolving. She has to compromise on her ideals to stay in power, which makes you wonder, are her methods justified? Is she becoming the ruler she wanted to be? Or is power, changing her in ways she doesn't even realize?
Interesting. Back in Westeros, Cersei Lannister, she really falls from grace, doesn't she? After Joffrey dies, stripped of her power, forced to walk naked through King's Landing as penance. Shocking. But she puts on this face of piety, like it's all good.
That walk of atonement, it's open to interpretation. Is she actually sorry? Or is it an act, a way to get back in people's good graces so she can plot revenge? That ambiguity, it's what makes Cersei so fascinating,
Definitely. Meanwhile, beyond the wall, Jon Snow is learning about the wildlings firsthand. Falling for Ygritte, even. He starts to see them as people, not these mindless savages everyone says they are. He notices Mance Rayder, the king beyond the wall, even fixed his black cloak, the one from the Night's Watch.
Oh, yeah. The cloak, it's like a symbol, right? It's saying, hey, things aren't so black and white. The wildlings, they're not just wildlings, that they've got their own reasons, their own complexities that the Night's Watch doesn't see.
Right.
John's caught in the middle between these two worlds, and that's what makes his story so interesting.
For sure. Okay, well, we can't talk about A Song of Ice and Fire without talking about the Red Wedding. Brutal. If you've read it or seen it, it sticks with you. Betrayal, bloodshed, just utter despair. Wow.
The Red Wedding, it changes everything. It's like Martin saying, no one's safe, not really, no matter how powerful they are.
Yeah.
Orchestrated by Walder Frey and Roose Bolton, it decimates Robb Stark's forces. His mother, Catelyn, too, just gone.
It really shows how fragile alliances are in this world and how ruthless some people are. And after the Red Wedding, Arya Stark gets captured by Sandor Clegane the Hound. He wants to ransom her back to her family, but who knows what will happen with those two.
Arya and the Hound, that's another interesting dynamic. He's this killer, but he seems to have a soft spot for her in his own way. And she's just a kid, but so resourceful, determined to survive. It's like a weird mentorship. They change each other in ways you wouldn't expect.
It's a wild ride for sure. Okay, back to Daenerys. We see her acquiring the Unsullied army, and then bam, unleashing her dragons on the slavers in Astapor. Dracaries. It's just like fire and liberation all at once.
That scene, it's amazing, right? She's becoming this powerful queen, breaking chains, taking on these oppressive systems. And those dragons, they're like a symbol of her Targaryen power. But it makes you think, even when you're fighting for good, that force, it has consequences.
Yeah. And Sir Jorah Mormont, he gives her a reality check. He says, when Aegon the Dragon stepped ashore in Westeros, the kings of Vale and Rock and Reach did not rush to hand him their crowns. If you mean to sit his iron throne, you must win it as he did, with steel and dragon fire. And that will mean blood on your hands before the thing is done.
Heavy. It's definitely a warning. He's saying, look, getting that Iron Throne, it's going to be brutal. You'll have to make hard choices, maybe even betray what you believe in. It's setting us up for some tough decisions she's going to have to make down the road.
Things are heating up on all fronts. So we left off with Daenerys facing some hard truths, huh? And at the Wall, things are going from bad to worse. Mance Rayder and that wildling army are about to attack.
You said it. The wall, it's like the last line of defense, right? Civilization against all that chaos and darkness. And the Night's Watch, well, they're the shield, even if they're outnumbered and not exactly prepared.
And Jon Snow's stuck in the middle of it all. Loyal to the Watch, but starting to understand the wildlings, too. He's seeing the real threat, those others.
Exactly, and that's what makes Jon's story so compelling. He's got to figure out where his loyalties lie. What does duty mean? What's the right thing to do? It's not so simple. And his choices, they're going to have huge consequences, not just for him, for everyone.
Speaking of consequences, we can't forget about Catelyn Stark. Even in death, she doesn't find peace. She comes back as Lady Stoneheart, consumed by vengeance for the Red Wedding.
It's like the dark side of grief, right? That need for revenge. She's not the same Caitlyn. She used to be compassionate, protective. Now she's terrifying. All she wants is to punish those responsible for the Red Wedding.
Yeah, a reminder that death doesn't always mean the end in this world. And while Lady Stoneheart is out for revenge, Arya is still on the road with the Hound, heading towards the Twins, of all places, back to where the Red Wedding happened.
Talk about trial by fire, right? Arya sees the worst of it, the brutality, the violence. She's learning how to survive in a world where kindness can get you killed. And the Hound, yeah, he's rough around the edges, but he protects her in his own way. Teaches her some hard lessons about survival.
It's a strange kind of relationship, for sure. But while they're out there, Sansa's still stuck in King's Landing, a pawn in the Lannisters' game. And then she finds out Tyrion's being forced to marry her.
But Sansa, she's a survivor. She learns to play the game, to hide her feelings, to wait for her moment. Think about it. She's lost everything, her family, her home, and she's surrounded by enemies. But she's still there, adapting, getting stronger. It's pretty amazing.
It's all about survival, isn't it? Finding a way through the darkness. Meanwhile, back at the Wall, that wildling attack is in full swing. The Night's Watch, they're facing impossible odds. It doesn't look good. What were your thoughts when you read this part?
It's intense, that's for sure. You've got mammoths and giants against men, desperate acts of courage, just trying to hold back this tide of wildlings. It really shows the scale of this conflict and just how brave those Night's Watchmen are.
And Jon Snow, he steps up, doesn't he? He has to make tough decisions, risk his life to defend the realm.
Totally. He uses everything he's learned about the wildlings, his smarts, his determination. He rallies the Watch, comes up with a plan, remembers those massive trebuchets, launching burning pitch at the wildlings. It's this desperate, fiery spectacle trying to hold back the horde.
Shows what kind of guy he is. But even with Jon's bravery, the Wall's still vulnerable. We gotta remember, Mance Rayder's army isn't the only threat. Those others are still out there, waiting.
Exactly. And they're a whole different kind of enemy. They're not just fighting for land or power. They're a threat to everyone, to humanity itself. It adds this like cosmic horror element to the story, you know? It makes you realize all these fights between kingdoms and families, they don't matter as much when you're facing an ancient evil that wants to destroy everything.
Gives you chills, doesn't it? Okay, we're getting close to wrapping up our deep dive. What else stood out to you in the source material?
Well, while that battle's raging at the Wall, things are falling apart in King's Landing. Joffrey's dead and everyone's pointing fingers. Tyrion's the main suspect, even though he didn't do it.
Right, because in Westeros, there's always another threat waiting no matter where you are. And Cersei, she wants revenge. She's manipulating everything, making sure Tyrion gets blamed.
It's like watching power corrupt justice. She doesn't care about the truth, just about getting what she wants.
And Tyrion, he's trapped. He asks for a trial by combat, hoping to prove his innocence.
Which is interesting, right? Trial by combat, it's like they think the gods will decide who's right. But in Westeros, it's not always that clear cut. It's more about skill, strategy, who's got the better fighter.
And Tyrion, well, he's not exactly known for his fighting skills. He chooses Oberyn Martell, the Red Viper, as his champion, hoping Oberyn's desire for revenge against the Mountain will give him an edge.
Oh yeah, Oberyn's got his own reasons for fighting. He wants justice for his sister, Elia. The Mountain murdered her during the sack of King's Landing. But Oberyn, he's impulsive. He wants the Mountain to confess, and that ends up costing him.
It's brutal. He almost wins, but the Mountain gets him in the end. Just awful.
It shows that even the best fighters, the most determined people, can still lose. And it has huge consequences, especially for Tyrion. He loses his last chance at a fair trial.
And he's sentenced to death. But he manages to escape, with help from his brother, Jaime.
That's a big moment for Jaime. He's finally standing up to Cersei, doing what he thinks is right. It changes their relationship and makes you wonder if Jaime can redeem himself.
And while Tyrion's escaping, Sansa gets out of King's Landing, too. Littlefinger helps her. She's free from the Lannisters, but she's heading into a world that's just as dangerous.
She ends up in the Eyrie with Littlefinger. She's got to learn how to survive in that nest of vipers. She takes on a new name, Elaine Stone, pretends to be Littlefinger's bastard daughter. She's learning how to play the game, how to deceive, how to stay alive.
Everyone's learning those lessons, it seems. What about Bran? He's still going north, beyond the wall, following those visions?
He's on a quest for knowledge. He meets the children of the forest, learns about the others, where they came from. He's uncovering ancient secrets, stuff that's been hidden for centuries.
It's like he's going back in time, uncovering the truth about this world.
Exactly. And while Bran's in the past, Arya's dealing with the present. She and the Hound, they're getting closer to her family, but the Hound's got his own plans. It's not as simple as it seems.
And their relationship keeps changing. He's still brutal, but he cares about her in his own way, and she's learning from him, getting tougher, more resourceful.
It's a messed up kind of mentorship, but it's making her into a warrior.
Yeah, she's going to need those skills to survive what's coming. All right, so we're back, diving deeper into A Song of Ice and Fire. Last time, we covered those battles at the Wall and all the scheming in King's Landing. We also saw characters like Tyrion, Sansa, Bran, and Arya, all in these crazy journeys trying to survive in this messed up world.
It's wild how Martin connects all those storylines, right? It just shows how big and complex this world is.
Totally. And it seems like every character's journey kind of reflects those bigger struggles for power and survival happening all over Westeros. So where do we go from here? Anything else in those sources that stood out to you?
Well, let's talk more about Bran. His journey going north of the Wall, it takes him way beyond those castles and keeps. He meets the children of the forest, those mysterious beings connected to all that magic in Westeros.
Yeah, that part really got me. It's like stepping into a whole other world full of myths and legends.
Exactly. And through the children, Bran learns about the others. You know, those terrifying creatures that want to destroy humanity. He's uncovering secrets that have been hidden for ages. It's like he's getting this whole new perspective on what's really happening in Westeros.
It's like he's peeling back layers of history and myth to find the truth. Pretty cool.
Right. And while Bran's exploring the past, Arya's dealing with the present. Still with the Hound, learning to survive, using her wits and her fighting skills, which are getting better all the time.
Their relationship is so interesting. He's a killer, but he kind of looks out for her.
Yeah, it's weird kind of mentorship, but it's definitely shaping her. She's learning that being ruthless is sometimes the only way to stay alive. She's becoming independent, resilient. She's going to need that strength for what's coming next.
She's a tough kid, that's for sure. Well, we're almost out of time for our deep dive. Any final thoughts you want to leave our listener with?
A Song of Ice and Fire, it really flips everything on its head. It's not your typical fantasy story. Good and evil, it's not always so clear. And even the most powerful people, they can fall. It's a story about survival, about ambition, about betrayal, but it's also about hope, you know? That even in the darkest times, there's still hope.
Well said. And for our listener, I think the takeaway is to really appreciate how deep and complex this world is. It's full of amazing characters, stories that twist and turn, and it makes you think.
Totally. And as you keep exploring A Song of Ice and Fire, think about the choices those characters make, why they do what they do, and how those actions affect everyone else. It's not just about who sits on the Iron Throne. It's about what that power costs, how strong people can be, even when things are terrible. It's about that constant battle between darkness and light.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us in this deep dive into A Song of Ice and Fire. Hope you enjoyed it and learned some new things along the way.